here. Wash hands. And that'll give us like a good 20-second lead in.
You're live.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Washing hands live. I think in these days of physical distancing, because I think socially we don't have to be as distant, but physically and hand washing all the time, showing people that we're doing it as opposed to doing it just before we turn the cameras on, might be our title graphics.
Yeah, should we have some sort of live music?
I thought about that. I thought about seeing if you could, create placards or something, and then we hold them up for the beginning of the show.
Oh, I see.
What do we don't even have a name for this. I think it's like cooking with the cap shells.
Right now it's called, I want to say Passover cooking something.
Okay. Well, this all started with our idea to take our canceled Passover meal and be able to offer demonstrations of all the recipes to you. Willa went to our grocery store here in Tofino last week on Friday, picked up a beef liver, a 3-pound beef liver, as well as a whole brisket. And we got this idea that we wanted to make the dishes anyway. We want to make them for the folks. We want to make them for our family. So that's Willa and I are here in Tofino, BC, where we now live, have done for the last year. Willa's parents live just down the hall from us here in Tofino as well. And Willa's sister's in town. So there's 5 of us. We had sold another 20-odd tickets for our Passover Seder, which we've since refunded. But we started by doing a chopped liver recipe last week because Willa having secured a liver, we decided you can't let a liver sit around, so we wanted to be able to cook with it. And left the brisket for a couple of days while we did matzah yesterday. We did a matzah demonstration. Do we have any around here? I don't think so. But Willa's packed it up. It worked out beautifully. So we're going to turn all of the matzah we made yesterday into matzah meal. We're going to run it through our food processor. And the matzah meal will go into the kishka. It goes into making matzah balls, obviously. And there's a few other dishes as well that will incorporate matzah meal, but not having matzah in Tofino. Oh, let's turn this light on too.
Oh, yes.
We've ordered some new lighting, so hopefully in the next few days the scene here will improve visually. And we're trying to do our best with the technology at hand. This entire episode is produced by Willa Bradshaw, and she is the best boy, the key grip. She's I think the camera actually went wonky too when you just shifted.
Oh, I did. Oops, sorry, guys.
So I mean, you can take the credit, but not the blame. That's we're all part of a team here, and I want to thank you all for joining us today and over the last few days as we've fumbled and bumbled our way through making chopped liver and then matzah. Today we're gonna drop our pants and run around the room. And actually, you're looking at our kitchen here in Tofino, BC. Well, kinda. I'm gonna give away the store. So brisket, and specifically smoked meat, is perhaps the thing that I'm most famous for. I started a restaurant in an old dive bar called the Monarch Tavern. Still exists in downtown Toronto. It's one of Toronto's oldest dining and drinking establishments. The Monarch Tavern is. And upstairs at the Monarch there was a kitchen, a professional kitchen that wasn't really being used for anything other than smoking. So the guys would go and they'd smoke cigarettes there. They'd turn on the hood fan so they could smoke inside. That's a fun fact. Until I came along. I rented the Monarch kitchen, and I used that as my first space and place to do what I'm going to show you today, which is making, which is curing, spicing, steaming, and then slicing smoked meat sandwiches. And back then, I think I actually have a copy around here somewhere of our original menu. It was a very small piece of paper. We had smoked meat sandwiches, hand-cut fries, coleslaw, which we also made by hand, mustard that we also made from scratch. We never made our own pickles, and we never made our own rye bread. We bought those from Strubs locally originally, and then we switched that to Putter's Pickles eventually, and we used Silverstone's rye bread. But discovering the secret to making smoked meat starts with a brisket, Well, why don't you join me here? She's going to wash her hands.
Talking.
Thank you. So a brisket is a cut of beef that comes from the chestal area of the cow. And fun fact about cows, they don't have bony breastplates the same way human beings do. So their entire weight of the inside of the cow is essentially being held in place by this piece of muscle called a brisket. And as a consequence of the fact that brisket gets used constantly every day by the cow to keep inside, it's a very tough piece of meat. And so the strands of beef are very, very tough. So brisket is the kind of cut that lends itself to low and slow cooking. So it's what people will use in barbecue cooking. Mm-hmm. They'll smoke a brisket at low temperature for a long period of time. Yeah. We're big fans of Cherry Street Barbecue in Toronto.
Oh,
and
wonderful. Sorry,
Lawrence LaPianta, who's the owner of Cherry Street, is a great friend. And he was actually a teacher of Ron Lee, who now has Little Ronnie's Barbecue here in Tofino. And Ron did our engagement rehearsal party.
Rehearsal dinner.
Yeah. The day before our actual wedding here in Tofino a few years ago, 2017. And Will and I were married at the church that's just literally over there, and we could
someday we'll turn around the camera and we'll show everyone.
Actually, when we do our Passover lamb, we will cook it on our patio here, and you'll get a sense of the neighborhood that we find ourselves in, which is a beautiful place to be.
It's wonderful.
And that moment of inspiration, where I came up with the idea to start curing my own briskets, those moments I think in life, Willa, are really, really precious. And it was a game changer for me, and it's a pleasure for me now to share that with you. I'll set the stage. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. I was managing a pizza pasta restaurant on DuPont Street in downtown Toronto for about a year, and a bunch of my friends were going to Montreal that summer. It was the summer of 2007, and I asked a number of different people to bring me back a Schwartz's smoked meat sandwich. And if you've never been to Schwartz's, it's just a miracle in the restaurant business. It's been around for almost 100 years. It's a wonderful palace of smoked meat. They're very famous for making cured, smoked beef briskets, kind of like the way I'm going to show you how to do it today. And it's a wonderful, deep and luxurious flavor. And I was asking friends to bring me back a sandwich. That's all I wanted. Bring me back a sandwich. And one after the next failed. The last one in that series of failures was Hart Lambert. That's right, Hart. Thank you. Because if you had brought me a sandwich, none of this arguably would have happened. So Hart, thank you for not bringing me a sandwich. Because in the desperation, the hangry eruption that I had that day at the Poorhouse Tavern, Charlotte Holmes was there. Charlotte's still a friend of mine who now lives in Victoria, BC. Mm-hmm. And I was angry that night, my friends. I was, what's wrong with people? Why can't you get a decent smoked meat sandwich in this city? You know what? I'm going to do it myself. And at the time, I could braise a brisket. That's another recipe that we're going to show you.
Yeah.
But curing a brisket, spicing a brisket, mm-hmm. smoking a brisket, all of those things were completely foreign to me at the time. When I say completely foreign, I don't mean completely foreign because I had gone to chef school. Mm-hmm. I had worked as a cook at a number of restaurants. I did have some aptitude to food. So the idea of curing, pickling, brining, those three concepts all mean the same thing, mm-hmm. Weren't completely foreign to me. But curing, pickling, or brining a brisket, no clue. And I had to kind of make it up as I went along. And so I did what people will do in these situations. Mm-hmm. I Googled it. And I found...
Did you Google it? But that Google was around it?
Whoa! Oh! 2007, the Google machine was invented at that stage. Thank you very much for playing the ageism card. I appreciate that. Yes, we have our... Look at you with the finding things. So when I Googled smoked meat, I came up with a book called Charcuterie, which is a very well-known, I would say, Bible of the charcuterie genre. And the recipe that I found called for Morton's Tender Quick. And it's available here in the co-op in Tofino, BC. Wasn't widely available in Toronto. It could be a provincial regulation thing. And today, for actually the first time, I actually read the package on the Morton's Tender Quick, which was never the recipe that I followed. I followed the one from the book. So I'm going to show you the recipe that I found in that book that day. And Morton's does also publish a home meat curing guide, which is a wonderful way to learn the process of meat curing. Curing meat can be applied to absolutely every kind of protein, and whether you brine your chickens and turkeys, which I strongly recommend because they're so lean, that's a great way to infuse flavor. And that's what, so brining does a few different things.
We will get to brining when we brine the lamb.
That's true. We will get to brining when we brine the lamb, but we're going to get to it right now today when we cure this brisket.
Yes.
So brining and curing, there are different methods. The method that I picked up on in this book, which I thought was a way for me to do this at home, which I'm now going to share with you in absolute intimacy. Well, not absolute.
No
okay.
telling.
I'm going to tell you. So there was a very famous deli on College Street called Becker's. And Becker's was famous for a pastrami sauce that Becker used to make. And I would have like a stream of elder people coming into the restaurant telling me about this incredible pastrami sauce. And he took the recipe to the grave with him. And their hearts would break a little bit when they that couldn't get that flavor. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be I don't want to be the guy who takes the recipe to the grave with him. I'm going to show you a technique, and you can make the technique taste however you want it to taste by using the flavor combination you want to use. I'll give you another fun fact about me as a cook. I don't usually work with or from recipes very well. It's
actually been quite annoying when we're putting together these demos, because it'll be like, Zane, what's the ingredient list? How do we get
it's a little bit of this and it's a little bit of that, and I add some of this and it's got to taste like that. But Will is the person who actually publishes the recipes on the website. You can find them all at Caplanskys.com.
Yep.
And you're right, it can be an annoying habit because that's just not the way I tend to work. And so in the restaurant, I was really blessed to work with some terrific people over the years who would take my flavors, turn them into recipes, and then scale up those recipes as we grew. But it's always important to remember too where you started from and how you started, and I'm going to show that today, the original brisket recipe. So Willa bought this beautiful example of a brisket. This is my F. Dick chef knife that I was gifted by my friend Carmelo Vatichino, and I am always happy to give a shout out to Carmelo. I met Carmelo actually in Newfoundland.
Did you?
We were both doing the Perfectly Centered Food Festival that Rory McPherson invited us to take part in.
Hey, Rory.
Rory! We're going to rinse this out before we throw it in the garbage later on. Just put it in the sink for now. Carmelo is a top dog, and the man shows up with a barbecue, a pizza propane-powered pizza oven. And it had 2 wheels for making 2 pizzas at a time. And I'm like, you're going to make fresh pizza for 500 people on demand? I think it was actually 360 people on demand. Like, good luck to you, buddy. Like, honestly, the idea, do you remember when we made making food to order for large numbers of people is a really challenging thing to do. And Carmelo does it with pizza in the most incredible way. I'm going to show you, getting back to my story. That's my F-Dick knife from Carmelo. This is our brisket. I'm going to wash my hands one more time because I touched the package, and show you how clean my hands are. So I'll give you a little lesson on the anatomy of a brisket, because that's kind of important to understand. as you work with brisket. And another fun fact about brisket is that it's in the upper half of the cow, and the upper half of the cow is the kosher part. So for people who kept kosher, brisket was an important part.
We actually have the brisket listed on
Hey, we
the
do
picture.
too.
I don't know if
Should
we
we
can
take it off
see
the wall?
it.
Can they see it on that camera?
No, you know what? I'll just tilt it up. In that
Look at
way,
you with the
maybe.
camera moves.
Maybe.
So this is our wall of art.
No, that doesn't
This was a wedding gift from Lima for our wedding. This was a fan letter that I got from Lewis Black, which still drives you crazy that I got a fan letter from Lewis Black.
There we go.
So you can see the cuts of beef on this stylized illustration of a cow, chuck, brisket, shank, the plate underneath here, flank steak, rib, short loin, and so on.
Sorry. Instagram was missing it.
There we go. Welcome back, Instagram. So we got our Facebook Live people. We have our Instagram Live people as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're doing a brisket demo. I was just telling a long, boring story about how I started in the restaurant business working with brisket. And that brisket is, as you can see, in the chest area of the cow. And you can actually see really well in this illustration the way brisket really holds in all of the other stuff. And so it physically keeps the cow together. And because of that, it's a very well-used muscle. And you can see that exact point when you look at the ends of the brisket and you see how thick and visible each strand of muscle is. In a sirloin steak, in a tenderloin steak, it's very hard to make out those individual striations of muscle. Here with a brisket, actually you can see where the fat was trimmed here. The grain of the brisket is incredibly visible, which will help us later on when we go to slice. Because when you slice a brisket, you always want to slice it against the grain. And again, you can see the way the grain is going very clearly here. This is what you call a whole brisket. Often briskets will be cut in half so that you'll get smaller pieces. I don't recommend cutting the brisket for this purpose, for the purpose of curing and smoking or roasting a brisket. Leave it whole as much as possible. And this one is quite well trimmed. Usually I would say I would like a full 3/4 cap of inch cap of fat on the bottom side of the brisket. This one was a little bit better trimmed than I would usually ask for. We got our meat in Toronto originally from St. Helens. And St. Helens are the same people who own the Grace Meat Shop at the corner of College near Grace. And Robert Belak was the guy that I dealt with at St. Helens, and Gary De Silva, his salesman as well. Great guys, great suppliers. We always got very consistent, amazing briskets. And it was also somewhat satisfying for me to know that most of their briskets went either to me or to Schwartz's in Montreal. And I know that Schwartz bought from them and from others too. But I can tell you that St. Helens was wonderful. So the recipe that I originally worked from was Morton's Tender Quick. And I created my own spice rub. And creating the spice rub, now that my hands are all full of...
I'm just trying to see if the spices are actually visible. I'm just going to turn a little bit.
Like the ones over here?
Yeah, the spices that we have lined up. I'm just going to move around a little bit, guys. Sorry. There we go.
So the spice mixture is up to you. And truth be told, we don't have all the ingredients here that I would have used in the original recipe. I actually have my original recipe written down in my own hand, which is really cool. But we're going to use what we have on hand, and it's going to taste fantastic. So we have whole black peppercorns, which is the biggest part of the recipe. In this case, we've used, I think it's 3/4 cup of black peppercorns. Again, whole.
Did you want
Yep. Yeah, we're going to, actually you can add to this one if you want. So we have yellow mustard seeds, and we could use brown mustard seeds, but I just used the yellow ones for this recipe, and whole cumin in this.
And how much, just tell me what?
Tablespoon. I tend to like things spicier than Willa does, but we're actually going to toast these spices first in the frying pan. And funny enough, this was the actual frying pan that I used for years and years, and I scrubbed to get the patina of spices out of the bottom of that pan.
So these are our whole spices here.
Yeah, these ones are ground. So this is paprika, and it's a smoked Spanish paprika, and ground coriander in this one, and then in this smallest one I've combined both garlic powder and onion powder. Typically I would use flakes, onion flakes and garlic flakes, and all I have on it right now is powder, and so that's the best.
Did you want whole coriander? Because we have some of that.
No, I figured it was if we're gonna use the paprika, we can just use the powder is fine. And we are gonna grind some of this up in the mortar and pestle. Typically, when I did this back in the day, I had a small 1 cup coffee grinder. So you can imagine the scene. When I first started, I would use this exact stainless steel. It's actually cast iron, coated in stainless. And I would toast my spices. Toasting spices really brings out the oils and the aromas, the aromatics in the spices. And you don't want to toast them beyond. Good idea. Thank you.
So it's a dry pan, right?
It's a dry pan, no oil, just peppercorns, mustard seeds, chili flakes, and cumin seeds. And it's all going to be seasoning the outside of the brisket, and it's all going to be on the brisket for over a week. So you don't have to be too fine with these things and worry too much about texture. You do want to worry about burning, because you can burn the seasonings if you toast them too long. So you'll actually, I've just got a really nice whiff of that.
Ooh.
I'm going to add the paprika and the coriander now. And
So why do you
salt.
add the ground ones later?
Well,
Why don't they all go in at the same time?
Yeah, I think that typically, so back in the day, I wouldn't use any ground spices. They were all whole spices. And I'm just a little bit concerned that they'll toast much faster. So I wanted just to give the black pepper a head start. But you can see that it's starting to smoke, and that's what I kind of expected would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And,
That smells really good.
yes, nice, eh? I'll add the onions and the garlic as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you tilt that towards the camera maybe a little bit?
Sure.
So people see what's going on. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
And I'm going to take that off the heat now.
So we had preheated the pan as well, right?
Yeah. This was on the whole time. You notice that we didn't touch the temperatures. And we will now use
Turn
the
off our element.
and we'll use the mortar and pestle to
So we'll do a little at a time because our mortar and pestle is
small.
small.
And while Will is grinding, did you get that sugar?
Yeah, the sugar's in the sugar bowl.
Sugar's in the sugar bowl, of course. Where else would it be?
Right beside the brisket.
Over here. Thank you very much. Perfect. So my original, and we're just sort of cracking the whole peppercorns. My original recipe called for 2 parts tender quick, 1 part sugar, and so we've got about 2/3 of a cup of tender quick, and we're just going to fill the rest of it with the sugar. One of the other sort of foundational notions that I always use is that you don't cure the fat. So I would always concentrate the cure mixture on the non-fatty side. When I said earlier that usually I would like a thicker fat cap than that, it sort of means that all of the cure that I'm going to use just has to go on the meaty side of the brisket. And it goes on quite generously. like so. Now this is, as we say, the dry cure method, and don't forget these exposed parts over here either. As we grew as a business, we changed the way we cured the briskets. So when I first started, I started curing my very first brisket at home in my apartment in Cabbagetown. I did it for a dinner party, and actually I did it for myself, and then I was invited to a dinner party, and the friends who invited me to the dinner party also invited a chef friend of theirs who I had never met before, a fellow named Jesse Valens, and Jesse and I became very good friends, and bless you. Jesse was, this is great.
Okay. I'll keep going with the rest of it.
Please. Jesse was the very first person to ever try. You're a very good mortar and pestilizer.
Well, you know, my first experience with a mortar and pestle was in Thailand.
Oh, yeah?
And we used to
You
grind.
did one of your semesters in high school in Thailand.
I did. My grade 10 final term I did in Thailand. 3 months with two really lovely ladies, Kristen Berg and Adele Nelson. I want to see your last name was.
No,
Sorry,
Adele Nelson is our chef
Oh,
cycling.
shoot. Adele Nelson is. I know too many Adeles. Kristen and Adele were both really lovely, and I'm sorry, Adele, I've forgotten your last name. I'm going to tag you, and I'm going to be embarrassed.
And so you learned to use a mortar and pestle.
So one of our classes that we took Thai language, took Thai music, Thai dance, and Thai cooking. And what we were told was that because you crush so many garlics and chilies in Thai cooking, that prospective husbands would walk by the houses of the women that they would be interested in to kind of check out how well they could hammer their mortar and pestle. So we were stringently taught that we needed to have good technique and to hit it nice and hard and get everything together.
I wonder, I guess I have to, I guess my judgment of mortar and pestle techniques is just fine because it worked out just perfect in my favor. I think that's great.
That's
we can
okay.
add that, and I think that's
So
probably
this is
going to
kind
be
of what
enough.
it looks like when it's done-ish.
Yeah. So it's important for people to also know that the spice rub that we use now is not going to end up on the brisket itself. So what's going to happen over the next 10 days, we're going to cure this brisket. And because of the curing salt that we put on first, the moisture is going to be drawn out of the brisket, and the pan that it's sitting in now is going to become quite full of juices, and those juices are going to mix with this spice rub, and then the juices and the spice rub mixture is going to get reabsorbed back into the brisket. And part of what has to happen in this dry cure method is that every day somebody has to agitate, that is work, the cure that we now have on the outside of the brisket.
So we have to start a brisket babysitting class.
There's a brisket babysitting club that exists every day. Absolutely right. I love it. And that's how we make sure that the brisket gets into every part of the the cure gets into every part of the brisket. And at the end of that 10 days, we're going to wash off all of the external cure and spices.
Okay.
And then we leave the brisket exposed overnight in the fridge, and it develops a tacky outer surface called a pellicle. And a pellicle is an important part of the excuse me.
I had the pepper in my throat as well.
Pardon me. Coughing in the age of social derangement is challenging, eh? The pellicle will help the smoke from the smoker adhere to the brisket itself.
Aha.
So we will rinse off the brisket. We will leave it rest for a pellicle. We will re-season with the remaining spices that Willa will also mortar and pestleize.
Yep.
for the final cooking segment. We don't have a smoker here, so we may just oven roast this, so it'll be more like pastrami than smoked meat. And we will also add some brown sugar before we put it in, because the brown sugar will also caramelize, help the spices adhere to the brisket itself, give it a nice crust and color too. So that's another pro tip that we developed over time was rinsing, pellicle, more seasoning with brown sugar at the end, and then once you've cooked it, you allow it to cool, put it in the fridge. When you want to use it, bring it out, steam it, and then we'll hand slice it, and we'll show you how that all goes. But this is as quick and easy as this was, half an hour. We've cured, spiced, and now we'll leave to rest our beef brisket, pastrami in the making. I'm gonna wash off my hands because I'm feeling all the spices.
Tammy's asking us to do a daily check-in with the brisket. She wants to be part of the breakfast babysitting club.
Oh, very good. Well, Tammy Pittman-Doddick is now in the brisket babysitting club. Thank you very much for joining Tammy. Tammy's our wonderful cousin who lives in Calgary. Will and I visited Ted and Tammy and their incredible kids, Britannia and Lincoln. Beginning of February.
Do we cover this when we put it in the fridge?
Yeah, we're going to put a piece of plastic, or we actually have that wax.
The beeswax will work?
Yeah, it should work fine. So we bought these reusable beeswax covers for things. I think we can use two of them. It should do fine. And every day, Cousin Tammy, we will meet. I guess when we do our other demos, we'll pull the brisket out. We'll give it a little agitation. We'll show you what that looks like. And then, as you'll see over time, the salt will draw the moisture out of the brisket. It will combine with the spices. The flavor will get reintroduced back into the brisket. No, it's square.
It's square. We have another one. We just left at Mom and Dad's.
Okay. Oh, who's plastic?
Oh, whatever.
Whatever. We can kill more plastic trees. No, wait. Hold on. Yes.
There's more.
Wait, there's more.
There we go.
So this is a long-term project. This one's going to take, as I say, 10 days. And I'm super excited to show you how we did it the very first time. Our production model and methods changed over time. We went from doing that very first brisket for Mark and Shelley in their backyard party that they invited Jesse and I to, and the whole journey began. Or in the Monarch Tavern, I used to use a Bradley smoker. It's an at-home. I remember back looking at eBay, trying to decide what kind of smoker I was going to use, and seeing these Cook Shacks and Southern Pride smokers that were $10,000 and $15,000 and $20,000. Yep, thank you. And thinking, who's ever going to want or need a smoker for $20,000 or $30,000? And sure enough, when I opened on College Street, it's exactly what I had to buy. A proper commercial grade smoker that could do the volume of briskets that I was doing. And we did this in the restaurant for many, many years. And this was the spice rub that we created. Now, one of the challenges with the spice rub, and you'll maybe appreciate this, is that you've got particulates of different sizes. So you've got the black pepper, which are quite chunky, and then you've got the ground ones, which are quite fine. And so in a suspension or a mixture of seasonings of different size particulates, you'll have the smaller ones settling at the bottom and the bigger ones hanging out at the top. And so I really did it at a certain point when my process would involve making enough batches of this stuff. I mean, it's such a wonderful memory for me to hold the exact pan in my hands that I used for months and months and months, where I would come home and it was actually a form of meditation for me, where I would create my spice rub, and at first I'd do a batch. And as you can see, a batch is enough for a couple of briskets. And then when it was, 4 and 8 and 20 brining at a time, and eventually we had, in the Monarch Tavern when I started, we thought that we could cure all of our briskets in the upstairs fridges, which would have been enough for like moving those blue bins that we have, those moving bins.
Okay, yeah.
Like
Rubbermaid
4 of
bins,
those.
yeah.
Yeah, Rubbermaid bins. And eventually the place got to be so busy with catering and so on that we had those tough guy Rubbermaid commercial garbage
the
bins.
really big ones.
And we'd have 24 of them.
Aye.
And we would have each one filled with 8 or 10 briskets. And every day we would have somebody go down to the walk-in fridge at the Monarch and churn by hand every brisket to follow this exact method. And then at the bottom of the pail, you would have all of that salt, all of those spices, and all of those juices. So we would pour those back on top. And you try to make sure that over the 10 days that you would do that churning, that briskets would get time in every different part of the barrel. So top, bottom, and middle, because otherwise you start getting into a production issue. That if the briskets in the middle or at the top aren't spending time in the cure, they're not going to get properly brined. So, to recap today's episode, we showed you the original Caplansky brisket that I made at home for the very first time in the winter of 2007. I showed you how to make the spice rub that we rubbed it with. Willa ground that in the mortar and pestle that the way she learned.
Yeah, this one is actually this one is like concrete maybe? I'm not too sure what exactly it is. It's really heavy and it's a Jamie Oliver mortar and pestle.
Way to go, Jamie Oliver.
That I brought back from England in my suitcase. And I guess it was before they were weighing suitcases because I wouldn't bring it back today.
Well, we're glad you did because now we could use it for this demonstration. And we'll reserve the rest of the seasoning mix that we will apply to the brisket when it's finished the entire curing process. Every day, Will and I will open up, agitate the brisket. I'll tell you, the excuse me, just the spices
the spices, I get it.
Every time I toss it around. I'll put it over here.
touch.
Yeah, it's invigorating for me to relive this process. That going from making briskets by hand in my apartment in Cabbagetown through the entire process and ride that was Caplansky's, first to pop up at the Monarch Tavern, then the 9 years on College Street after that, the food truck, the airport restaurant, the mustards, and everything else that happened started with this. It started with that epiphany of, why can't I get a decent smoked meat sandwich in this town? I'm going to make it myself. And once you make that decision, you then have to figure out how to do it. And so again, Morton's Tender Quick is the cure that I used. I used a 2-to-1 ratio of this stuff to sugar. So I used 2/3 cup of Morton's Tender Quick. I added 1/3 cup of sugar. I added some unknown quantities of black pepper, of mustard seed, of paprika, of coriander, of cumin, onion, and garlic. The brine was hand rubbed on the brisket. We followed that by rubbing the spice on the brisket. Every day we're going to check in with you. We're going to show you how the brisket is coming along. You'll see that it will express some of the juices inside. Those juices will marinate in the spices and in the salt cure, and they'll get sucked back into the brisket day after day as we work that thing. Oh, and red chili flakes. I didn't say red chili flakes. This is fantastic. I want to thank Willa for being the inspiration for everything that I do. Thanks for helping out today as well. Thanks for
we'll get to grinding, and I really wish that we had the
original 1-cup coffee grinder. When Will and I melded our lives together, I think I had one and you had one, and then we had this burr grinder that we started using for our coffee, and I think we finally disposed of that.
We got rid of the original. I think in the move.
I think in the move too. Because I kept it for sentimental reasons for a long time. And this pan was the original pan that I used to toast my seasonings in.
That's a great pan though.
It is, and again, it's cast iron and it's coated with stainless steel, so it holds its heat very, very well. And having the aromas that this place is filled with now just brings back all of those feelings and sensations of creating my spice rub. So again, thanks for the encouragement to do these videos, to share this with our friends and family at home. Tomorrow, we're going to take the matzah that we made, we're going to turn it into matzah meal. We're going to make kishka, not sausage style, but loaf style. And then that kishka is going to be incorporated into our chicken fricassee. We're also going to go back to the co-op and look into maybe a piece of brisket, something that's 3 or 4 pounds. That brisket is 7 pounds, one that we've been working with. And we're going to show you braised beef brisket, which is, braising is a different technique. Basically, you take a pan that becomes covered, so either with its own lid or tin foil, and it's cooking covered in liquid. So the meat will have, for our brisket, it's a tomato sauce recipe, and we're happy to show you that one too. I did that one on Stephen and Chris a number of years ago, and that was a really fun thing to do. What else? I think that's pretty much it. Check back in with us tomorrow to see our kishka, and we will do our brisket babysitting club as well with cousin Tammy. Anybody else who wants to be along for that ride can tune in as well. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Thanks to Willa for helping to put this together, and maybe some good things can come out of this this current situation that we find ourselves in. I want to send out a special message and love and hope to everybody who's having a hard time in the world. I hope we were a bit of a distraction for a few minutes, and thanks for coming along the ride.